Welcome, Scott. And
Thank
let me
you, Walter.
say, we're in the Greenwald Pavilion, so we have United Heritage here. And let me say, out of full disclosure, I'm on the board of United, so I'm a big fan of Scott. And
good to be with you, boss.
Yeah, well, no, he's the captain, but we're a great crew that works with him. Coming out of COVID, tell me what you foresee for travel, business travel, leisure travel.
Well, anyway that's flown recently, at least flown on commercial airlines, you see very crowded airports. And leisure demand is back, domestically at least, more than 100%. And I think what that tells us is something about the huge desire, people can say pent-up demand, but I think it's more than that. The desire to reconnect, we all missed it. Events like this are so much better in person. When you can network and see people afterwards, and you see people just going, demand is through the roof for leisure demand. Domestically, business travel really is still down probably 65%, but 2 months ago it was down 85%, so it's more than doubled. Mm-hmm. And everything that I hear, including talking to people within the last 24 hours, I think that when we get to September, that business demand is going to start to come back as more people are back in the office. And I at least have been on the record since last March saying that while business demand will take a little time to recover, ultimately, and we can talk about it if you want to, but I think it'll ultimately come back 100% because business travel is about human connections and relationships, and it's not a transactional issue, and it'll come back 100%. And then internationally, borders are still closed in much of the world. Europeans can't come to the U.S. Nobody can go to anywhere in Asia without quarantining. So until those open up, that part of the business is shut down. But huge improvement in the demand environment. We're hoping that international borders get open soon. Every time a new border opens up, we have bookings that go through the roof. Our team actually, I thought this was funny, a month or so ago, Iceland, Croatia, and Greece had opened up, normally not in the top 10 countries for demand to Europe. And they had a chart and they said, can you guess what the number 1 and 2 travel demand destinations are to Europe now? And I guessed Iceland and Greece, and they're like, wow, how did you know that? Well, they're the 2 places you can go. But we feel good. It's not over yet for us. But
let me drill
really
down
good.
on this business because so many people have gotten used to. All right, I'm not going to fly across the country for a 2-hour meeting. We're going to do it by Zoom. You don't think there'll be some percentage of meetings that'll be that way? And if there are, will that be replaced by? And the reward is you get to, all get together for a retreat.
There probably will be some. I think Zoom is going to be more of a replacement for phone calls than it is for business meetings, again, because it's about relationships. It's funny to listen to people and watch as their views evolve. I can remember talking to one of our top 5, the CEO of one of our top 5 corporate accounts who's, services business consulting. And he was just giving me advice and said, you got a plan for, this works great, this Zoom, we're never going back to travel. And, we spent over $100 million on United Airlines last year. We're going to be cut in half, everyone's going to be cut in half. Talked to the same CEO in the fall and said, well, we've realized we got to do 100% of our customer facing, like we're losing the connection with our clients and our customers. So we're going to do that, but all the internal meetings, which is about half our travel, we don't have to do anymore. And I talked to him in February and he said, God, our whole business is about creating a culture and we're hiring all these new kids straight out of school. They've never even been in our offices. We're going to have to do more travel internally in the first year or 2 at least to rebuild that. And I tell that story because I promise you if I went back and told him, I'm using him as an example for 3 different conversations, he wouldn't remember them. Because his view just evolved from, this worked great, and then you start to realize how it doesn't work. And having traveled on my own now, it's getting back to travel, it's you in a way, I think, appreciate it even more when you can be around people. We took it for granted before, frankly. And when you had a year of not being able to do it and get back to doing it, the conversations are deeper, they're more intense, they go in directions that they didn't before. So I've been a fan, because I think it's about human nature. And as bad as COVID was, it didn't change human nature. And we like to be around other people. We're social creatures, and we succeed and fail based on relationships. And business travel is about relationships.
Yeah, well, I'll welcome our digital viewers on this and say what you've just heard means that next year, we expect you to show up in
Yeah,
person.
and you know, I do think that there'll be meetings like this that, my guess is you'll be back to the 1,000 or however many you had before of people wanting to be here in person, because, you know, the people that are watching digitally, you know, won't be at the reception tonight and won't get to, you know, meet new people. The serendipitous meeting of people that happens. But there'll probably be 1,000 people that watch on Zoom as well next year, so there'll be more people that watch, but the whole audience will be bigger.
So how do you plan to grow the airline, and will it change from the hub system that it's been for businesses?
Well, you know the answer.
I know.
Well, you know, look, at United in particular, we've got a unique opportunity. United has unique hub demographics. You know, our hubs are in New York City, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C., Chicago, Denver, Houston, and L.A. So they're, you know, literally the 5 biggest travel destinations in the country, and then the other 2 are in the top 10. And so there's a unique opportunity at United to grow and also not just grow, but really change the customer experience. One of the things that has happened during the pandemic is we've had a 36-point improvement in our Net Promoter Scores. We've changed all kinds of things about trying to change how we treat people and customers.
Give me some examples.
So my 2 favorite examples are, one, we got rid of permanently eliminated change fees. Thank you. And secondly, we've created this program called Connection Saver, which there were storms here in Denver yesterday, and I got on. We have an ops call every morning at 6:45, and I think it's a leadership point that I get on it every day. But anyway, this morning we saved over 800 connecting customers in Denver alone because of the storms. And you know,
Wait, explain what Connection.
Yeah, anybody that's flown a lot, you know, you've probably run through an airport when you're getting to a connection. Whatever airline it was, might have been United, might have been another airline, was late getting you to your connecting city, and you run through the airport, out of breath, you get to the gate, and the gate agent has just closed the door, and you say, please let me on. The plane is right there, it's still connected to the jet bridge, and they tell you no. And so we've changed that policy, but those 2 policies are not just about changing those policies. Those policies are about changing the culture. Because if you're a gate agent and you have spent your career being forced to slam the door in a customer's face that's standing right there, and then your management team tells you, we want you to do the right thing for customers, you think they're full of you know what. Because it's not walking the talk.
But you use a computer algorithm to say how many people are supposed to be connecting that are late, how long should we hold it?
And we don't always hold, because sometimes it's going to have a bigger downline effect. But the difference is we also will now tell the gate agent, we're not holding in this case because we've got another flight in an hour and a half that we can get them on. And if we delay this airplane, you know, there's 200 people on this flight that have connections in Chicago or something. But being able to change that, and that more than just those 2 policy changes, they are about changing the culture and convincing frontline employees to do all the little things. Because, you know, if they believe that the company really is empowering them to do it, they will start to do the little things to make a difference. And I said, well, Walter read my write-up at the end of the year for my self-review, and I ended it with, my job, you know, I think is pretty simple. 1, make our employees proud, and 2, make our customers like us. We're an airline. I aspire to love, but I'll go for like right now. And those 2 things go together, because a proud employee, and look, it's still an airline. We're going to still make mistakes, and we're still going to have weather, and we're still going to have maintenance issues, and the Aspen Airport is still going to be closed sometimes when you wish it wasn't. But you know, if we've created a culture where people feel pride, then they want to do the right thing for the customer. They're not jaded. And really change that experience for them.
So with the growth plans, United has older planes. I know next week there's supposed to be an announcement that's in the press already that there'll be more planes, but I want to get you even further out.
Yeah.
Tell us about airplanes of the future, supersonic and others.
So yeah, there is a rumored announcement next week that's coming, but
I'm not asking about that one.
I'm not a very good secret keeper.
No.
But so the future for aviation is well, supersonic is one of the exciting ones, and we're partnered with a company called Boom Supersonic that's here in Denver. They're great engineers. I did joke the first time I met their CEO. I said, "Man, you've designed a great airplane, but you're a terrible marketer." And he said, "What do you mean?" I'm like, we can't have an aircraft company named Boom. And he started explaining it to me. He's like, no, supersonic, Boom, supersonic. Like, I get it, but we can't have an aircraft company named Boom. But we're excited at United. We were the first airline to order electric airplanes. We were, of course, the launch partner for this, for supersonic aircraft. We also insisted that the launch took a little longer because we insisted that these airplanes they'll be the first jet engines ever designed from the ground up to run on 100% sustainable aviation fuel.
Wow.
And I'm sure thank you.
We'll get to that.
I'm sure we'll get to that. It's a personal passion of mine.
But explain the demand for supersonic, since the Concorde, you haven't even thought about it.
Well, the Concorde, technology was 60 years old. The Concorde ran on 4 engines, and the fuel burn was massive. Not only did it run on 4 engines, it ran on full afterburner the whole time, which means afterburner is after fuel burns through an engine where it burns really efficiently, they literally dump raw fuel into the exhaust, and the exhaust is so hot it ignites the fuel to create extra thrust. And that's what, if you see an F-15 or an F-16, most of the time if you're behind them, you can't see the fire coming out of the engine because they don't have afterburner on. That's what they use for the extra kick. But it burns, 6 to 8 times as much fuel. So these engines are designed to not run on afterburners. Only 2 engines instead of 4 engines on the airplane. So just radically different engine technology in particular. There are changes to the airflow and the airspace, though the airplane looks remarkably like a Concorde, with engineering being aeronautical engineering being what it is. But this is an airplane that'll be able to get you, 3.5 hours from New York to London, less than 6 hours from San Francisco to Tokyo.
And what about electric planes?
Yeah, so electric aircraft, we've also, we've signed one public partnership, we're working on some others. My guess is that we're going to have a world where small, short-haul flights, helicopters and small, short-haul flights are going to be electric. But big airplanes flying long distance are never going to be electric unless there's some, not even on the drawing board, breakthrough in physics for electric aircraft because the energy density is not high enough. So hydrogen has 1/3 the energy density of jet fuel, and in batteries are about 1/20th, which means you need 20 times the weight in batteries to fly. And when an airplane takes off flying long haul, more than half the weight of the airplane, about half the weight of the airplane, is actually fuel for the flight. And so they're never going to replace jet fuel, which is why, by the way, sustainable aviation fuel becomes important.
Well, let's get to that. What is sustainable aviation fuel?
So, first I'd say climate change, I think, is the most important generation for my generation to face. We're here in Aspen. All you have to do is look around and see why it's important. And there are, just catastrophic implications if we don't solve it. And I've been a geek about climate change since I was in college. I read a lot, and this has been a personal passion of mine. And now I'm in a position I can make a difference. So at United, there's 3 things that we're doing. One is sustainable aviation fuel. And right now, United actually represents more than 50% of the world's commitment to sustainable aviation fuel, because the industry really doesn't exist. What we've done is invest in startups and R&D and technology to try to help build the industry. But really, it's taking waste product. So one of our investments is a company called Fulcrum that takes municipal solid waste. Before it goes into the dump, it goes to a facility, and each ton of waste produces about 4 gallons of fuel. It also, by the way, methane leaks are a big issue for garbage facilities. It reduces that, of course, and we produce it from a sustainable source. We're working hard also in Washington to get support for that industry. That's going to be a big part because we're still going to burn jet fuel, but if we can produce it from a source like that, it can at least be net zero. Second one is some of the work we're doing on electric aircraft. But the third pillar, which I think is the most important pillar, and it's not unique to aviation, is carbon sequestration. And if you just do the math, there's no way we can get the world to zero without carbon sequestration, because there are a lot of industries that simply can't be decarbonized. Aviation is going to be one of those. Steel is 8% of global emissions. Concrete production is 8% of global emissions. Agriculture is more than 20%. Most of you in the room, probably the biggest impact you have on climate is potentially what you eat, and we're going to continue to eat. And so we've got to accept that if we're not going to get to zero emissions, what can we do? And today, almost every company that says they're going to be net zero uses what are called carbon offsets. Essentially, that is planting trees. And the reality is, if you go look into the programs, most of the programs are a fraud, to be direct about it. Mostly, actually, you can't find information on what the programs are because they bury it and hide it. Most of them, however, if you look into it, really aren't real. They're things that were going to happen anyway or already existed. But even if they weren't, mankind produces 4,000 times as many emissions today as we did in the pre-industrial era. There is not space on the planet to plant 4,000 times as many trees. And as long as every single corporation is using that as their way to check the box. Check the box and produce a marketing message that they're 100% net zero will never solve the problem, which is why we have to do carbon sequestration. Thank you. By the way, I see Mike Bezos, and I'll give Amazon credit. They announced that they're building 14 renewable energy power plants. That's also different. A lot of companies will site their facility next to a hydropower plant, and then they say they're 100% green. But of course, that hydro plant already existed, and so it's not creating new electrons on the grid. Building new power plants that are green is actually real, and more companies need to do the same thing.
And Stuart and Linda Resnick have just created something huge at Caltech on sustainable energy and climate.
Thank you.
Scott, you were at the Air Force Academy, interested in flying, and you've said recently that we may have a shortage of pilots. What's causing that problem, and what can be done?
Well, we are going to run into a shortage of pilots. It's not a critique of the military, by the way. It got reported that way in some places, but just the factual reality is that the military doesn't produce as many pilots as we did in the Vietnam era. We just don't have as need for as many pilots, both because we don't need to fly as many airplanes in combat, and secondly, because the aircraft are so much more efficient today. One B-1 or B-2 bomber, can carry a much larger payload. And drones. And so we've got to do something new to create a pilot workforce and supply. And being a pilot, I think most people kind of know it, but it really, I don't think people fully appreciate how good of a job it is. At United Airlines, we have 210 wide-body airplanes. Our captains on those 210 wide-body airplanes made right at $400,000 a year last year. And of course have great benefits, and they're really good transformative jobs. So one of the things we've done at United that I'm proud of is we also launched a program called Aviate, where we're the only airline in the United States that owns our own pilot training academy. But beyond just having our own pilot training academy, because we're gonna take people that don't have any experience in being pilots, they don't have any hours yet. We're going to be able to be really selective. We're going to be more selective than the Ivy League school, given the number of applications we've had so far, but give people a shot at becoming pilots. And today, only 19% of our pilots are either women or people of color. And by the way, that's the highest of any airline in the United States. Historical reason, you either had to come out of the military or you had to spend kind of $150,000 of your own money to get enough hours to get started being a pilot. And, so you had to come, most people just didn't have the opportunity. And so in our Aviate Academy, we are going to give at least 50% of the opportunities are going to go to people, women and people of color. We're going to access a much deeper pool of talent and people. I got sideways with Tucker Carlson about it. Actually, I wouldn't know Tucker Carlson if he walked in the room right now, but over that issue. But now I know who he is at least. Because we did that. But really, it's going to be a great thing. And, to me, far too many companies talk about diversity and don't do anything. And for us producing, up to 500 pilots a year that are women or people of color that have those kinds of opportunities, I hope will not only be transformative for those individuals, but for their families. And, if a kid grows up in the south side of Chicago, and we've partnered with some organizations there, and gets an opportunity to have a job like this, my guess is that they're going to make a difference in their communities, in addition to the difference in their own life. So we're really proud of that.
Tell me about Biden's infrastructure bill, how that'll affect travel in general.
Well, look, I'm really supportive and hope that the bill passes. I think it's also incredibly important that it be a bipartisan effort, and so I'm really glad to hear that it seems to be getting back on the rails to be a bipartisan effort. Because if it's bipartisan, it will have support, and we'll all have the confidence that it's going to last. and that a new administration, even if there is a new administration at some point in the future, won't reverse it. It also is critical. There are parts of this country where we have the best infrastructure in the world. There are parts that we have the worst. And I just recorded something earlier today where said, this is both literally and figuratively about creating the on-ramps to get onto the highway for individuals, for small businesses, for businesses. I mean, you watch something like what happened in Texas, where Kathleen and I live, 2 days of really bad storms, and supply chains around the country are still shut down over that issue. You read about the bridge, across the Mississippi River being shut, and it's just shut down commerce outside of Memphis because the bridge is, not repaired. And it's just inexcusable for a country like the United States to, have bridges on major interstate highways, going out. Or you look at airspace. Basically we've built, 5 new runways approximately in the last 20 years, while demand, has grown by 100%. So we're trying to use the same infrastructure that we had 20 years ago to fly twice as many people with predictably poor results and frustrating results. And
what about air traffic control?
Air traffic control modernization is another one that is very unique to aviation, of course, but incredibly frustrating. Today we still fly highways in the sky that were first laid down. There used to be bonfires, by the way, and they turned them into TRACONs, in the 1920s and 1930s, and that's why if you fly from Aspen to the East Coast, you fly in a zigzag pattern, and we could use GPS technology that exists. It's not like breakthrough revolutionary technology that exists right now to fly with modernized air traffic control, straight lines in the sky, better approach paths, and we could cut the amount of time that you spend in the air by about 10%. Importantly, we could cut carbon emissions by about 10%. I mean, it's one of the lowest hanging fruit on the tree. It makes me incredibly frustrated.
And what's stopping next-gen air traffic control?
So air traffic control modernization, to be blunt, some of you in the room may be part of AOPA, a group that, private pilots group that lobbies heavily against kind of any change under the theory. Today, 99+% of air traffic control expenses are paid by commercial airlines. And so there's a theory in private aviation that if you change anything, the camel's nose is under the tent, and we might have to start paying. So they're basically opposed to any kind of change. That and then noise restrictions, noise rules. Amazingly, if you use next-gen aviation, it cuts the total noise by about 60%, but because you're flying precise GPS routes, it's over the exact same house every single time, instead of being over 20 houses like it used to be. And so those people that live in the exact line get really upset. So those are the two big issues.
What's it like dealing with the Biden administration? I think Pete Buttigieg is part of this conference coming up and some others. Who do you deal with, and what is it like?
They have been great, particularly on COVID response issues. They've been very focused on that. Kudos to the administration. I don't think we're going to quite get to the 70% goal, but we're going to get close. And if you look at where we were back in January, I don't think anyone would have thought that the state the country would be in today would be there. I was really happy to read, what Biden was saying this morning about the bill and getting it back onto the, bipartisan rails, and they've been focused there. So I'm optimistic. I also hope, by the way, that if we could get bipartisan infrastructure bill, that it could start to pave the way for finding things we can agree about. Like, we got to get back to a world where we can find things that we agree about, and even when we disagree, not be disagreeable to each other.
That's sort of what this institute's about. So thank you. By the way, I happen to have my United
thank you.
mask.
It looks well worn.
Yes, well, thanks. But how long do you think we're going to have to wear these in airplanes?
So we'll see. Right now it's an FAA rule, and it goes through September 13th. And so my best guess would be that it will expire, just be allowed to expire on September 13th. And then each individual airline, will be able to set policies.
And what's your thinking on that?
We were the first airline to require masks, and it was controversial when we did it in April of last year. But it felt like, I was was following the science and was confident it was the right thing to do. And we took heat for the first week, but within a week, kind of everyone was doing the same thing. And my guess is by the time we get to September 13th, it's going to be safe. I mean, I certainly feel safe, being here, and most of us are vaccinated. I'm vaccinated, I would.
Will
feel safe.
United ever require a vaccine proof?
So I don't think United Airlines on our own will, certainly not in the United States, but I think governments around the world are going to require it. So if Kathleen and I and the kids are going to Europe this summer, if you're going to Europe, they require you to have a vaccine, or in a lot of cases, or having to, if you don't want to quarantine, you got to have a vaccine. When Asia opens up, it is almost certainly every country in Asia is going to require vaccines. So governments are going to require vaccines, I think, for international travel. Would
you like the government or the airline industry as a whole to have one rule on that?
I like governments for international travel having a rule about vaccinations, mostly because it's the only way that we're going to get it open. But beyond that, I was supportive of a rule to require masks early in the pandemic, but I don't personally think it's necessary anymore. And by the way, also, an airplane is the safest place you can be and be around other people. United actually partnered with the Department of Defense, who wanted to test this. And there was a great article like, why is United Airlines flying a 767 in circles out over the Atlantic Ocean? It's because we were testing COVID protocols and airflow.
But the COVID protocols are mainly HEPA filters in the air.
It's the HEPA filters and the fact that an airplane, on a modern airplane, the air is recirculated through HEPA filters every 2 to 3 minutes. And hospital ICU is HEPA filters every 20 to 30 minutes. And literally that study wound up saying being on the airplane, in an airplane, is the equivalent of being 15 feet away from, sitting next to someone, right next to them, is the equivalent of being 15 feet away from someone inside of a building because of the airflow. So
now my hack that I do, and tell me if I'm right or wrong, is I always open that air vent and let it flow down, thinking, okay, that's filtered air. Is that right?
It doesn't make a difference, according to our studies.
Darn.
It makes you cool, though.
Yeah, I like it anyway.
Yeah.
And what about vaccines for customer-facing employees? I mean, vaccines for the employees who face the customers.
Yeah, so we've had a big debate about that. I was on record publicly as wanting to mandate vaccines. I was also, it wound up in the press, but I told employees, and that always winds up in the press. But we have not mandated it yet, and probably won't, because we can't be the only big company that does it. We'd just be in the middle of a firestorm. But what we are doing is we're the only airline that's done this. We've negotiated deals with our pilots and flight attendants unions for international destinations, that we can designate an international destination that they have to be vaccinated if they're going to fly and bid to go. Because of that, we're now up to about 90% of our pilots have been vaccinated. And we did that because United Airlines is, I've taken to calling this, essentially we are the flag carrier of the United States. We fly more long-haul international wide-body airplanes than almost all the other U.S. airlines combined. And we fly to all kinds of destinations, India, Singapore, Africa, that no other U.S. airline even flies to. And this really rang true to me early in the pandemic when we were flying airplanes into China in particular and loading them up with cargo and bringing back oxygen canisters and ventilators and PPE. And then the administration called us, when India became a hot spot, and to make sure that we were going to continue flying. And, to me, then it became a moral imperative. We put this rule in place kind of with India because, we're asking our crews to go into a place that's dangerous and or potentially dangerous and a hot spot. And, it wasn't really about money because, in this environment, we're not really making money on it. But it's about the humanitarian response. And, we've carried over 1 billion pounds, of medical equipment since the pandemic started, hundreds of tons of oxygen canisters and such into India. We evacuated the entire embassy staff and their families, non-essential staff and families, and U.S. citizens. And, so to us, it kind of was a humanitarian requirement. But if we're going to have to fly to places like that, then we're only going to let crews that have been vaccinated go into it.
Let me open it up. Questions, please, no complaints about lost luggage, but otherwise, questions, please. Way in the back, I see. from the way back. Yeah.
Thank you for bringing us all back here today. What a scintillating, fascinating question and answer you've just had with Walter Scott. I wondered if you could tell us, you're doing so much on the climate front. What else are you doing to help people be as healthy as possible, given the last 18 months that we've gone through? Those chocolate chip cookies are hard to resist sometimes.
That's an excellent question. And I wish I could give you as strong and passionate as an answer as I can about climate change. We've tried hard as we went through the crisis to, one, maintain health and safety through all the work that we do at the airports with masking and vaccines. We were amongst the first companies to have vaccine stations at all of our hubs, and so our employees could get vaccinated ahead of time. We have created a number of new programs where employees have mental health and wellness, a brand new program that we created that can be online, where they can get on, particularly as you went through COVID. Obviously, we have great health benefits among kind of top 1% of health benefits as you go through. But it's one of the things that we're talking about more. And the truth is, we don't know the answers yet. You talk about something like return to the office and what that means for people's health and wellness and well-being. And I think anyone that says they know the answer yet is probably wrong because it's so new to us. And so we're going to try to experiment and not put hard rules in place and let different groups try different approaches on return to the office and figure it out as it goes without being, without mandating from the top.
Elliot. I'm sorry, is that Bonnie? Yeah. Okay, Elliot, yeah.
Tell us a little about your challenges managing unruly, if not violent, passengers.
Present company excluded, yeah.
There's been a lot of news about this recently, and it's different at United. And it's different, I think, partly because when the pandemic started, we thought it was probably going to last at least a year. And literally, we started planning for it the last weekend of February before anyone else was planning for it. And we thought it was going to last a year. And that changed our approach to things. And so when we were the first airline to require masks, our biggest issue was how do we avoid altercations in the air? And we created this 3-step process with flight attendants where they ask you once, they ask you twice, and then the third time we carry them on all the airplanes, a laminated card that they give you that says, if you don't put your mask back on, you could be banned from flying United until the crisis is over. And we've had to ban over 1,000 customers that we don't allow to fly for that. But we've avoided, and that whole story to our flight attendants, we gave them training and support, like, do not fight with customers. If they're not wearing the mask, give them the card, and after we land, we'll ban them, and it'll be over. And because of that, we actually haven't had these kinds of incidents. And we've had a 50% reduction in mask incidences on United since January this year. And it really, we're in a different position because we created a set of, because we did it first, we planned for how do we avoid that, and it hasn't really happened on our airline.
Yeah, there.
You covered for us the career path to be a pilot. My friend Barney Harford, who serves with you, Walter, tells me that being on the board is one of the greatest jobs in the world. Could you tell us the job path to there?
Tell us what?
Be really nice to me.
And it may be more important, more pertinent to Walter is, what are you doing about diversification of a board in this day and age, and how does an old white guy get on a board today?
I don't think I'd get on today, and we've brought one new African-American woman on, bringing on another. I think the next board person will probably be either Latino or Asian. It's part of the actual scope that we've asked. We do believe diversity is extraordinarily important, not just for the symbol of it, but because we're an airline that's trying to serve all people in all places. And it's been it's a interesting experience at an airline over the course of years. But the board has, I think, become much stronger since people like me were allowed. I mean, since well after people like me were allowed on.
We're really lucky at United. We have a really good board, and we've strengthened it. We've got 3 women on the board. Our last our last chairman
Jane
was
was chair.
Hispanic, and the chairwoman before that. And we all think that, we all know that diversity is important.
The
just to have
president of
perspective.
United
The
is
president of
African
United is
American and a great guy.
African-American.
Y'all will meet.
And we, we have a good board. There are people like Walter that, I like and can talk to. And that's what a board should be. Shouldn't have board meetings where you just sit in a meeting and you go through 600 mind-numbing pages of PowerPoint slides and try to stay awake, as opposed to, people that you can talk through things with. And an event like this, I mean, for somebody, in my role, an event like this where you just talk to people that are not airline people, but, what's happening in China? What are your views? What's your views of, this, that, around the world? That's where you get the insights to make a difference.
Scott Kirby, thank you.
Thank you, Walter.
We planted that last question for you. Great.